No one in the holding area gave the old man more than a glance. Just another black vagrant in an orange jumpsuit. That's all he looked like to the officers on duty. To Officer Ronald Hayes, a burly white man in his late 50s with a ruddy face, and Officer Eric Tanaka, a younger Asian-American officer with a dispassionate demeanor, he was nothing but another case file waiting to be pushed through the system. That man was Elijah Monroe, 68 years old, thin as a rail, his gray hair closely cropped, his deep-set eyes weary but calm. He sat quietly on a steel bench, hunched forward slightly, as though trying to disappear into the chill of the detention center. The cold metal beneath him offered no comfort, and neither did the sneers of the officers. "Look at him," Hayes muttered to Tanaka, voice deliberately loud enough to be heard. "Guy probably doesn't even remember where he stole the damn car from." Tanaka didn't respond at first. He gave Elijah a brief glance, then shrugged. Probably thought it'd be a good night for a joyride. They chuckled between themselves, but Elijah said nothing. He simply lowered his eyes and stared at his calloused hands that had known decades of labor, hardship, and now condemnation. The sting of their words didn't make him angry. It made him tired, because he had heard them all before. The truth was, Elijah had expected to be ignored, forgotten, misjudged. That's what life had taught him, especially since he'd ended up on the streets after a string of unfortunate circumstances and no family left to fall back on. But this time, silence wouldn't be enough. At precisely 10 a.m., the courtroom doors opened and the bailiff called the case. The People versus Elijah Monroe. Courtroom 6B at the Franklin County Courthouse carried the usual gravity of justice. Dark paneled walls, the American flag hanging behind the judge's bench, and a hushed murmur from those in the gallery who had come to watch what they thought would be a routine case. Presiding over the matter was Judge Camilla Whitmore, a composed woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and a meticulous demeanor. She adjusted her glasses and glanced over the docket as Elijah was brought into the courtroom, shuffling slowly in his oversized uniform. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Brendan Lowell, a man in his 40s with a sharp suit and a sharper tongue. Representing Elijah was Amelia Navarro, a young but determined public defender who had only been practicing for a few years, but who had made a name for herself by truly caring about her clients. As Elijah took his seat beside her, Amelia leaned close. "We're going to tell them the truth, Mr. Monroe. Every word." He nodded once, his lips pressed together to hold back the emotion that threatened to show. ADA Lowell began. "Your Honor, the defendant was found behind the wheel of a Ford F-150 pickup truck belonging to a Mr. Harold Gentry. The vehicle had been reported stolen. When approached by police officers, Mr. Monroe had no registration, no explanation, and no license. This case is in fact quite simple." He called Officer Hayes to the stand first. Hayes described how he and Officer Tanaka had noticed the truck driving erratically near Riverbend Road shortly after 11:30 p.m. He looked disoriented, Hayes testified, didn't respond to commands at first. And frankly, he didn't seem like he had any business driving a vehicle like that. Tanaka followed. His testimony was more restrained, but echoed the same sentiment. He couldn't explain why he was driving the truck. Said something vague about an emergency. But we had nothing to corroborate it. From the way the jury looked, the case already felt decided. Then came Amelia's turn. She rose slowly. Her voice was calm, unwavering. "We do not dispute that Mr. Monroe drove that vehicle. What we ask the court to understand is why. And to understand that, you need to hear from him directly." When Elijah took the stand, the courtroom fell into a hush. "I was walking along Cold Creek Road," he began, his voice soft but clear. "I usually collect bottles, cans, things I can recycle for a few cents. It was late, cold. I remember seeing the moon above the trees." He paused, hands trembling slightly. "Then I heard the crash. A sharp metal sound. Tires skidding. Glass breaking. It came from down in the ditch. I ran toward it." He described the overturned Cara red sedan smoke rising from a hood. Inside was a young woman, unconscious blood trailing down her forehead. She looked like she was barely breathing, Elijah whispered. The door wouldn't open. I had to smash the glass with a rock. His hands bore the scars. He'd pulled her out, laid her gently on the grass, and tried calling for help. But his prepaid phone was dead. There were no cars on the road, no houses nearby. And that's when I saw the truck, he said. Parked just across the road. No lights. No one around. Door was unlocked. Keys in the ignition. I thought maybe it was God answering my prayer. So he did what he thought he'd never do, got behind the wheel. I just kept telling myself, get her to help. Get her to someone who can save her. That's all I thought about. He drove the young woman Sarah Gentry, 27 years old, to County Memorial Hospital. She was stabilized just minutes after arrival. And as soon as he was sure she would live, Elijah turned the truck around to return it. That's when Hayes and Tanaka arrested him. The courtroom remained still as he finished his testimony. Some jurors shifted in their seats. A few had tears in their eyes. Amelia Navarro rose. Your Honor, I would now like to call Mr. Harold Gentry and his daughter's husband, Mr. Patrick Bloom. Patrick took the stand first. Sarah was minutes from dying when she got to the ER, he said, voice breaking. The doctors told us that. And she told us about the man who saved her. She remembered his eyes, his hands, the pain he went through to pull her out. Then Harold Gentry took the stand, the truck's registered owner. That night, I left the truck by the road while I went for a short walk in the woods. Stretched my legs. Never thought to take the keys. When I found out what happened, I was ashamed. Ashamed that anyone would think of pressing charges against this man. He gestured to Elijah. He didn't steal my truck. He borrowed it to save my daughter's life. The courtroom, now full of silence, seemed to breathe as one. ADA Lowell stood, looking defeated. The prosecution will not pursue further action. The jury was dismissed. Judge Whitmore remained solemn but resolute. In light of new testimony and the legal principle of necessity, she declared, this court finds Elijah Monroe not guilty of vehicle theft. She paused, then leaned forward. Mr. Monroe, you reminded us today that the law cannot stand apart from humanity. You may leave this courtroom a free man. A wave of emotion broke across the room. Amelia wept as she embraced Elijah, who simply closed his eyes, his dignity no longer eroded but restored. Outside the courthouse, reporters never came. No headlines were written. But in small corners of the city and the church where Elijah now tended the garden, in the community center where Patrick Bloom volunteered, in the office of the public defenders, his story lived on. And for officers Hayes and Tanaka, who faced disciplinary review soon after, the memory of that quiet man in chains became a lesson far more permanent than any reprimand. They had seen only a stereotype, but the truth had stood before them dignified, brave, and silent until the courtroom gave it a voice. And that voice changed everything.